Well, so last week we talked a lot about the mind, right? We talked about how learning sort of takes place and some tools that we have in trying to help our students really think more deeply about content and to sort of engage with the material and possibly have it be more memorable to them, right? This week we're going to get into the planning and preparation that happens before we ever grace the doors of our ministry, okay? We want to just discuss that and really think that through. And then in the next week, of course, is Easter, and so we won't be meeting. And the final 2 weeks for this class after Easter, we'll get into a couple of methods of ways we can deliver lessons that might be a little bit different than what just typically comes to mind. And so those will be fun because it may open us to new possibilities on how we can lead lessons. So today we're talking about the effective planning and preparation. And after the class last time, Darla and I were chuckling because we were talking about how a lot of these things are on our minds when we hear and learn and discuss them, right? But over time, you just fall into your same ruts, and unless you're thinking about it or actively pursuing a more exciting way of teaching, it's like the same style. You kind of relax into the same, like, let me just share the information, right? And we miss a little bit of the opportunity that we have to make these things, you know, memorable and really meaningful for our students. And so I just wanted to touch on that first and say that there's always time for us to be reinvigorated and to start again and to reapply some things. Or maybe if you've never been exposed to these things before, awesome. It's a great opportunity to attempt something new. So as we go through this course, I hope that it will refresh you and give you new ideas on how to present information in a meaningful way. Today, as I said, we're going to talk about the importance of planning and preparation. These are the things that we do far in advance of getting up to teach. And I think in churches, we actually run this risk in a special way of just showing up and turning the lights on and doing the next thing. Because I think we get into this thinking of like, well, we have our real lives, right? We have our paid jobs or what we do for a living all week. And then when we come to church, it's not that we're trying to give less to the Lord. Maybe we don't stop and think of it that way. But we're giving this like extra. It's a bonus. It's like the gravy on top, right? After we've put in a lot of work all week. And we may not think of it as something that we really need to approach with the same caution or a greater caution, because what we're sharing is the Word of God. And so when we teach, we just really want to be sure that in any ministry that we're a part of, that we're preparing as much as we can in advance and coming ready to really engage our students and really help them to learn and grow. Before I get into any of what we are going to share with you today, we do have an activity that we hope you'll be on board with. That we thought it would be kind of neat to share some of what you have on your cards with a group of people. We would divide you into groups, and we are hoping that maybe 2 people would be willing to do a brief skit that you guys put together to just show one team what it looks like when a teacher is prepared, and really emphasize the things that maybe you have done in advance in your skit to show that this is what it looks like when you are prepared for your lesson. And the other team, of course, will show us what it looks like when you show up for ministry and you are completely unprepared. And we want to see the effect of how that looks. So first, I just want to know if you guys are on board with that. Okay, and if we have at least 2 people that wouldn't mind being the actor in the skit, and everybody else can sort of give them ideas. We have 2 people willing to do this so we can pull it off. We're all looking toward Mike and Aaron.
Mike and Aaron?
Yeah. No, anyone. Anyone willing to do it, maybe? All right.
Yeah.
One
Is there a
more we
script?
can do.
Is there a script?
Do I need to memorize the script?
Oh, Aaron, you're the best. Okay, So let's divide it like this. Let's say, if you are in the front row, you can be part of the team of unprepared. And if you are in the back row, you are the team of the prepared. So Brian, all of you guys across, you guys can do the teacher that's prepared. So get together, here's what you're gonna do. You can gather up real quick, we just have a few minutes. Share your lists with each other. You guys sort of brainstormed in advance the list of what kind of things are good to prepare in advance. And so get together, share your lists, and come up with what things you're gonna show in this brief skit. 3 minutes, like just to give us an idea, okay?
Really unprepared? We are unprepared.
You are unprepared.
Oh, so we don't have to do anything.
Let's do what we always do.
I love it.
5 minutes late.
I
Right
love
up your
it.
alley, buddy.
That's
Make it real.
You are a very prepared person.
Never, ever prepared enough.
Oh, everybody's joining me? Oh, thank you very much. I feel so special.
Yes, it comes to you if you need.
What time is it?
Well, you want to go? I mean, it's my turn.
5 minutes to plan, and then 5 minutes for each team to present.
Tell me what to do, or rather what not to do, I guess.
Well, we're supposed to go over.
Well, you
Supposed to share our
have
lists.
you have all the stuff I wrote down, so
This is good because
You
you're
have the
listening
same
to me.
thing?
We really, it's interesting that we do.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to go first?
Yeah, I put, first pray, research, topic, outline, scriptures, questions, aids or visuals, reflection, reflection and closing.
Yeah, some of the stuff.
So,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
trying to figure out
have
what I.
1 and 3, so I have first pray, quiet time, reflection, then I'm gonna research the topics, but then I'm gonna pray again, so that I can kind of get guidance. Then I'm
Just
gonna
make sure
think
that you
about
have
the
the tools
audience,
needed to
women
present
and
and
children,
come prior
that's
to make
mostly
sure
what
it
I
works.
stick to. And then the type of lesson, it would be
Especially when
devotional,
it comes
video,
to
live,
if you're
and
gonna
then
use
the length
technology.
of
Have a
the
plan
type
B if it
of
doesn't
lesson
work.
that I'm gonna do, and then the scriptures for the lesson.
Happens a lot.
I'm gonna build on that
Gotta have
with
plan B.
questions.
Cool.
And allow time people to process.
That makes sense.
Plan for that awkward silence.
I have none of that.
Well, you were a teacher, so you have to.
Well, I'm thinking of,
What you did.
what, 50 years ago, I was a teacher.
There's
There's a difference today. I just put down organized information in logical order, prepare pertinent questions as follow-ups, contemplate possible responses, and make available any supporting materials. So it covers everything that they said, it's just that it's not as detailed. I'm not a detailed person.
People
That
know
we're
what I'm
supposed to
trying
do,
to
Yeah.
because I think our group is supposed to be
Unprepared.
unprepared group, right?
Yeah,
So
so
What type?
ready, go.
Right, so what does that look like? You come into the
the lack of
class,
all these things.
right?
Yeah, the opposite.
Right, it sounds like you come into the class, okay, so what do you want to talk about? You know, who?
Yeah, oh, I don't know.
Right,
Let's see.
but that's
Right.
what.
Simulation aids like
Looks
this.
like what you want to talk about. Okay, Marilyn, what, you want to talk about phones, okay? How does that relate to scripture? You don't have the scripture, right? Okay, Danny, do you have the scripture? Okay, who wants to look at the scripture?
Oh, wait, we don't have Bibles? Yeah.
Right, we don't have Bibles,
Yeah.
right? So kind of sticking into that,
Mhm.
exactly what's on there, and then if you have something different.
Yeah, because if you don't have the logical order of how you're going to present your material, then you don't have any of the information, you don't have the chapters, you don't have the verses, you don't have that.
So your class wouldn't have Bibles, we wouldn't have pens, right? So where your class, you know, and this is perfect, we don't have no Bibles, we were trying to put our pens down, we don't have pens. Well, you know, who has a laptop to look up, you know, Philippians 2:8? And we would just look at you, you know, and be like, okay, well, Darla, do you want to, possibly, look up whatever?
Right, how do we portray?
Okay, well, neither do I, so let's see where we can get
In,
one.
And then somebody asks you a question and you have no answer.
And you have no
Yeah,
answer.
because that was one of the things we wrote down as being prepared for, like, questions and unexpected things happen.
Anticipate questions and objections and prepare a response.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody, you know, the queen over here would ask, you know, well, you know, my dad was telling me about John 3:16. You know, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that. Okay, well, does anybody want to help, you know, with that? And you're like, and then you go to another topic because you don't.
Yeah, I'm not prepared.
And
You were already.
the person who wanted
You got
to
the right,
know
you
more
were
about it,
there.
hungry.
Yeah.
Because I don't foresee you as.
Although I wanted that, you know.
Yeah.
2-minute warning.
2-minute
Having
warning.
that
Because you have the challenge
uninterest,
All right.
kind of like,
2-minute warning till presentation time.
2-minute warning.
Right.
Okay, so how are we gonna present this?
So like, I'll go up and I'll say like something, some sort of bland reading. Okay.
It's almost like you have to make a plan. of
Sure.
how you're gonna pretend to be
Not
unprepared.
have a plan,
But
right?
also because you're so like,
That's the way, yeah. we
Organized.
plan it.
This is hard for me. Okay, so then I guess I could probably like,
All right.
here's something I could do. I could bring my tablet up and I could be fiddling time.
Great, you're on it.
Trying to like,
Because you're well versed in it.
I should have brought it.
yeah, I'm having a hard time. I can't.
Right, come on, you're not
Yeah,
prepared.
I know there's something wrong.
I should be on the.
Okay.
yep.
What do I teach? I teach history and government.
And then eventually I'll
There's
find
a
the
bunch of
notes.
8th graders.
like I wanted to talk about
Who don't care
Or
about
maybe,
history and
maybe I don't find the notes and I'm like,
And-
well,
and his
it
job
turns
is to
out
make
I
it-
can't find my
Okay.
notes, so what
So
would you like to talk
you
about?
can come to the office.
Yeah.
And I'll show you the map.
No.
Yeah, I can't find them, class, so you know what, we're just gonna end early.
We're gonna end
Well, does
early.
anybody?
Does anybody have
1
anything
minute
they'd like
till
to
go
discuss?
time. 1 minute.
Yeah,
And then,
would you like
So
to
what's
talk
your
about
plan? You're
it?
gonna come in, say
Should
hello.
we ask?
yeah,
Don't say your
Yeah.
name, don't present
no,
your
right,
Yeah.
prepare to say your name, so, hi, everybody,
And you don't
let
want
me,
to.
oh, that's a good idea, I like that, I like that,
And then like, hold on a second, this time.
yeah.
Try to. I always say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so how is everybody doing? Wonderful weather we're
You
having.
know, we have like 30 minutes, so you want to try to like have our sort of nice.
30 seconds till one group is on.
Like, yours-
So that's-
30 seconds.
Curveball.
Yeah.
Well,
Where's the real answer?
Okay.
Where's the real answer?
was,
Yeah.
it's that verse that talks about, you know,
Yeah, I like that, I can do that,
does anybody know the reference?
yeah,
Yeah,
And then we'll ask questions. If you want to.
yeah, that's perfect.
Good job, you guys. Good job. Whatever happens next, we think nothing less of any of the contest. No, this is going to be fabulous.
awesome.
It is going to be awesome. So we have two groups. We have the unprepared and we have the prepared. Which group wants to go first? We have the. I believe we
He's already
have.
standing, so.
He's ready, he's
Yeah,
prepared.
we're prepared. We are prepared.
Are you ready?
So,
All right, I'm going to hand this over to you, my
So,
friend.
so I've got Mike and Lester and Brian at various parts of the room. Okay, good afternoon. We need to start on time, so it is, looks like it's 4:26 there, is that right? And start time for the class is 4:26. So, let's go ahead and start. So I have a handout for each of you here. Brian, if you would hold on to that, you can peruse that if you like. And then Mike, you can take a look at this and use this at your leisure. And Lester, you may do that as well. All right, now let me tell you what my objectives are. What we want to accomplish by the time we finish here today. For instance, I would like Mike, I would like you to know something. Lester, I would like you to be able to affirm what Mike knows. And Brian, I would like you to be able to tell them that you agree with what they know. So do you all understand where I want you to be at the end of this? All right, now, I'm going to put out some information, but I want you to feel free at any time to stop me and ask questions. I would ask that you don't talk over one another, and if you want to just raise your hand and get my attention, and I'll call on you at that point. If I'm answering somebody else's question, go ahead, raise your hand, I'll acknowledge you, and I'll get back to you. Is that clear? Okay, very good. I got some feedback. All right, here we go. So what I want to talk about today is Nehemiah. Now, I've been talking about this for the past several weeks. You folks have been with me. And what I wanted to say is Nehemiah had a burden. He had a burden because his brother came to him and said, the walls of Jerusalem have been knocked down and they have been destroyed, and they're in a state of disrepair. Now, Nehemiah was thinking that this was not the case, but in fact it was. He was thinking something different, but in fact, in reality, he had found out that what he thought existed did not exist. Now, Mike, sure.
Where was Nehemiah when this news came to him?
Well, you know, Mike, if you hold on just a second, I'm going to get this out, and that maybe our progression through this will answer that question. Now listen, if I get too far into this and it doesn't answer your question, I want you to raise your hand again. Okay, very good. All right, Brian.
Mike, you were right to ask that question.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's the kind of, that's the way I'd like this class to go. We need to affirm one another here. Okay? All right. How am I doing on time? What time is the class going to end here? Let's see. I think it's 4:31.
Yeah,
And how much time do I have there, Mike?
about 4 or 5 minutes.
I have 4 or 5 minutes left. Oh, that's pretty good.
Well, wait a second. You're looking at my phone or not? Yeah, 2 minutes.
The embedded class clown over here.
In summary, how's that? Very good. All right.
Oh, thank
All right.
you very much, prepared group. Now, the other group, we're going to talk about this to debrief. Both of them, we'll lump them together. Next group, let's have you come on up there.
Oh gosh, I'm late, I'm sorry about that. Just bear with me a minute. I have notes. I have to find them. I know they're here somewhere.
Mr. Little Pianco,
Yes.
while you're looking for those, do you have our assignments graded from last time?
Oh. No, I forgot to do that.
Okay.
I also can't find my notes. So I had wanted to talk about that passage in Scripture that talks about, I think it has something to do with the end of days, yeah?
Do you have extra Bibles?
No. I forgot to grab those.
Do you want me to go get them?
No, because I don't think we had time.
Okay.
Do you know where they are?
No, I think they're somewhere upstairs, but they might not be.
Do you know the room?
It could be the sanctuary?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I wanted to talk about a passage about the end of days, but I also cannot remember what that passage was. Does anyone have anything they would like to talk about, since clearly I have not prepared well for this? Yes.
Could we go over, I was talking to my dad, could we go over John 3:16?
That's a wonderful idea. Would anyone like to not read that because you don't have Bibles? We'll do that maybe next time. Does anyone have any non-Bible verse related
Well,
questions?
I know it. Is it, for God so loved the world that he gave his only forgotten son? Is that the one?
You're close.
Okay.
Close. There's one word in there that was not correct. Forgotten is supposed to be begotten.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Would you like me to explain it or look it up?
Could you look it up?
Yeah, I can do that.
When will we have our grades for our assignments that we did?
That is a wonderful question. Hopefully before next class, but I'm not going to make any promises.
Oh, okay.
According to this, begotten is the past participle of beget.
That explains nothing. I have no idea what that beget means.
Well, I think we're out of time. Any other questions, we will answer them next time. Thank you.
Good job.
Oh, man.
That's a good thing.
First of all, I want to tell all of you guys that on the spot like that, you were really good sports for doing that. But I also want you to know that really from both the groups, on the spot like that, you gave a really good example of what to do and what not to do. Let's see if we can do this. Let's identify 3 traits or 3 qualities of a prepared lesson, a well-prepared lesson. 3 things that you can identify from that first skit. What characterized a well-prepared lesson? 3 things. And the other group, you could be thinking of 3 things that characterize your very poorly planned lesson. Yes. Which was actually well planned. Blake, give me one.
Dave knew what his objectives were and what he wanted the class to gain from the particular lesson.
Very
Right
good.
off the bat.
Yeah, very good. And he stated his objectives.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes you don't even have to explicitly state them, but it can be, clear what the objective is. Without saying, objective number 1, objective, not that Dave was wrong for doing that, he was right for doing that. But it doesn't even have to be that explicit. Very good. That was one good thing. Yeah. Was your hand up, Danny?
No.
Oh, okay. Brian, was yours?
Read my mind. I think you did real well with the condensed version.
Mhm.
I mean, because you know yourself in the real world, you can relax a little bit.
Sure.
But he was, for being on the spot, you couldn't expect a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And to be right to the point and keep moving along.
Sure. Yeah.
Because he's doing it right.
Yeah. So the fact that he was well prepared, he knew his objectives, and he knew how to keep the thing moving along, right? Very good.
He had his materials.
He
In
had
other
his
words, he had
materials.
supporting materials that he passed out
That's
ahead
right.
of time so that the class could.
So part of being well prepared means having what is necessary for that class, having materials ready ahead of time. I saw your hand.
I think with Dave's objectives, he gave the class accountability. Like, Mike, you're going to do this, and then he gave everyone also an objective,
Yeah.
and then held them accountable. And I
Sure.
think that's part of the delivery of your plan and objectives.
Very good.
Because Brian kind of said, hey, I agree, he kept, because not everybody has a purpose.
Right. Right. Daily affirmations with Brian Lively. Yeah.
He wasn't flustered when Mike asked him where Nehemiah was. And
Yeah.
So he was prepared to be derailed and how to stay on track.
Sure. I like that. And I liked how he handled it gracefully. And rather than get flustered or say I don't think you could have asked a more out of bounds question. It's certainly not what we want to do, but to be able to redirect and keep the train moving, I think was excellent. Now, speaking of trains and the way lessons can derail, let's think of some qualities of a not so well prepared lesson. What did you observe in that skit?
He was late.
I could do my normal
Okay.
life.
What's that?
I could do my normal life.
Oh, no, we don't have to have
With
confession
excuses.
time. Okay. Dave said that just right off the bat, he was sprinting into the room. Obviously, was running behind, and did not have his own person by the start of the class time. Okay, so that's not what we want to be doing. Okay, what other characteristic of a not so well prepared lesson?
Because he was late, his material wasn't ready to present the class, and
Sure.
then when it was time for him to get the material, he couldn't find it, so
Yeah,
he wasn't prepared in that sense where I'm ready to go.
that's right. That's
Or
right.
with a backup.
Yeah,
Like, well, my computer, I can't find it, but I've got my notes, let's
that's right.
work from there.
Because technology will always
Yeah.
fail.
He, to build on what Mike said, when Aaron recognized that he wasn't prepared, he didn't have any confidence, and that rubbed off to the class. And so it started to become a free-for-all.
Yeah.
And now the class is now driving the direction of where the session is going. So-
Now, I will observe, very good observation, and I will observe this, Cyndi and I commented on this. Thank the Lord. If this was a class of pre-K, K, first grade, second grade, brother, you would have been toast. If there were chandeliers in here, they would have been hanging from it. But we're with it amongst friends. We're in a Christian community, adults, and there tends to be within the body of Christ a lot of grace extended. But you have to remember this, that grace among people sometimes will be extended only so far, and then patience runs out, and then anxiety sets in, and then frustration, and then next thing you know, everybody's frustrated. And so that's important to remember. Listen, both groups, you illustrated better what you just did, what we could sit here and vomit out to you as content. You know, we could sit here all day long and just spew content, but the reality is that learning is doing, and there was a lot of doing that resulted in much learning. So I trust that you guys found that profitable just now.
It was.
Good.
I already used that.
Awesome. Very good.
Speaking of that as a teaching tool, using activities where you act things out, or even to like imagine or create scenarios together, even if people weren't willing to act it out, we could have discussed the scenarios. We just did that this morning in my Sunday school class. I teach 3rd through 6th graders, and we were about to talk about how from the Bible verse in from Judges, how whenever that people were doing what was right in their own eyes, and so we went into this scenario where the kids got to contribute, that there were 3 siblings and their parents went outside to work in the garden, and what happened with each of these siblings, with each one doing what's right in their own eyes. And they had so much fun developing like different personalities for each kid. One thought it was snack time, and the other thought they should clean up for mom, but the other wanted to be left alone to play with his Legos. And it just developed from there. But the more they thought about that, and then when we came back and read the verse and talked about how Israel, what it would be like for them to not be following God, but for each person to be doing what they thought was right in their own eyes, it made that connection better than I could have by just explaining that to them. So it can be a teaching tool that we can use. Okay, I do want to go to page 9 of the notes. We want to discuss together, I really would like your input as we sort of hash out here in a few minutes the importance of planning and preparation. So we did talk about how this is something that we're doing way in advance of our lesson. And just to defend Aaron here, Aaron is our Lego teacher for in co-op, and he's an outstanding teacher. So, like, don't fall for his gig here today. He's always tremendously prepared. All right, so number 1 there in our notes says to prepare your heart. We didn't put any bullets under that. We want you to give us some feedback. We have some things to share with you as well. But what do you think that means? How do you prepare your heart? When do you prepare your heart for a lesson? Go ahead,
I
Lester.
think that's almost the first step, especially in terms of like a Bible lesson, because you want it to be honoring to God. You don't want it to be about just spewing information. You want it to really land somewhere.
Yes, amen, absolutely. And so what do we need to do in that process? How do we go about doing that? How do we prepare our hearts for that task? You're right, it's the most important
You
thing.
have to pray before you even begin to prepare,
Yes,
so that you have a direction, that God gives you direction of where you're going. So
absolutely.
you don't go out on your own.
Yes,
And
and
just-
that's a submission, right, Joyce? It's like we're acknowledging by praying that none of this is what's coming from our mind or from what we know. It's coming from the Lord, and we're tapping in to that source.
Because it may be something that you didn't even think about.
Yeah.
You know, that if you don't. So
Yeah.
that would be my first step.
Yes, prayer, absolutely. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I was noticing, not many people play a violin. And, watching Aaron play, watching the feeling, looking at his face, watching the way that the music is just, is it coming from the heart? You know what I mean? Is that a preparation of the heart as you're playing those beautiful songs? Because it just looks like so enveloping,
Yeah, absolutely. So you see the difference in the teacher or the presenter based on the preparation they've done, right?
And as it goes along, it just keeps on getting better, you know what I
Very
mean?
good.
He's right into it, and it just, you can't help but be drawn in.
Yeah,
I mean, if there was no music playing, I'd be watching his face. Just
yeah,
because
yeah.
there's something going on there,
I think what you're saying is that authenticity is going to be evident. There's evidence of authenticity, and you're finding the evidence of his authenticity in not only his countenance, but his body language and his manner of expression. And you can see someone disingenuous, you can see that becomes transparent too, because you can see that it appears to be a put on, there's a show, there tends to be an attraction of attention towards self, rather than a deflection of that attention to God. So I think that is a very good point that you just made, Brian.
Very good. Now what about if I'm going to teach a lesson and it includes a passage about anger, let's say, and I know I just messed up and have been angry within that day that I'm preparing this lesson. What's part of my preparation of my heart then going to include that week? Confession. Humility, yeah, confession. And leaning into God and saying, Lord, you know I failed in this area, right? But this is your word and I want them to understand it just as I want to understand it. Help me to grow, help me to understand what I'm teaching, etc. So yeah, prayer, confession, looking at our motives. Some people teach just because they want to be a teacher. That's a pretty sad reason to teach, especially in a church. And in fact, the Word of God says that not many should presume to be teachers, right? Because you're judged more harshly. So we need to look at our motives. We need to prepare our hearts to be surrendered, like Joyce said, to the Lord and what He has. We need to come with joy. That's a preparation in advance. And confidence from the Lord. Okay, so there's more to say on that, but we'll leave that there for the sake of time. What about preparing the lesson? What are some things that we are going to do in advance to prepare the actual lesson that we're going to present? I have a feeling you didn't read Nehemiah this morning for the first time as you were teaching it for Sunday school, right?
That's
Dave?
correct.
Yeah.
You've guessed correctly.
Yeah.
Now, some of the things that each week I work with a 7-step plan, and I do it from Monday to Saturday. And the goal is on Monday, I do step 1 on Saturday evening, my 7th step is to hand my handout to my wife, have her proofread it, make sure that it's good, correct anything that she says, hey, you need to correct this, and then I'm done. And then I actually do a little bit of a dress rehearsal on Sunday morning.
Perfect,
You know, early in the morning, but, you know, just, which includes, every one of those steps includes,
Oh.
Lord, I need to get this right because this is important to glorify you. And so prayer is obviously very much a part of that.
Yes,
All the time.
perfect,
So.
great, that's wonderful. Of course, developing the lesson plan would be part of it, right? What about those thought-provoking questions that we said last week, right? Evaluating, writing them down so that we don't, so we're ready, we're prepared to ask those questions that make people think. The knowledge of the content, you know, sometimes we need to almost predict what could confuse people or what questions may come up. We need to brush up sometimes on some peripheral things, not because that's what we're teaching, but because they may ask us, and we want to be prepared to go ahead and answer those questions if we can, right while the student is curious. Also, one thing that's a good idea sometimes is just to write out our concluding statement. We teach that in speech, that sometimes how to end something can be like, so that's all I have for today, you know? So what we teach the kids in speech class is to write out what's the last thing I'm going to say. So that when you sort of sense that it's time, you read this like summary type statement and you feel good that there, left it how it was supposed to be left. So give yourself that little cheat of maybe having that written down. Anything else for lesson before we move on? Anybody else have something, a burning idea about lesson that we didn't touch on, preparing the lesson?
Based on what you said last week, I adjusted my lesson plan that I used for, and I actually wrote QA, you know, and so wrote out the question, wrote out the answer that I expected to hear, and some verbiage to supply what if I heard other things, you know, so I included that as a portion of my lesson plan this week because although I know this, I've done this before, you forget it, and I like what you said earlier, you tend to, over time, drift back into what is your comfort zone. And that's why these types of things are important, not only for people that have never done this before, but for people who have done these things all their life. You know, because you get into a routine and you forget the basics.
Absolutely, Dave, absolutely, I totally agree. Dean?
And also too, as I, you know, like you preparing your lesson, all that, I would look for like keywords. You know, like she said, what is begotten? You know, and you know, I think that, you know, like keyword, I would research that and have the meaning for that, and whatever verses that I want to use for that lesson that day, then I would know what those keywords is, and I would, more than likely me, I would bring them up.
Yeah.
So they would know.
I love that anticipation of what could confuse people, and let's just go ahead and get it all worked out for them right while they're here and curious, right? Great, excellent, you guys. All right, what about procedures? Now, some of this isn't always going to be the case maybe in adult Sunday school classes, but if you're working with Donna Seymour on a Sunday morning, there are procedures and things to set up, supplies. And so how do we prepare in advance for changing procedures during a class? Like, let's say Donna Seymour's Sunday school, they have like maybe playtime in the playroom, but then they come in and they sit for a snack, but then they transition to a lesson. What can Donna do to make sure that she can go through all of those things without kids climbing out the windows in between? Brian?
I think you're asking a question that only women can answer.
That's not true. That's not true.
That's on tape, man.
Yeah. Come on, men. Somebody show you.
Mike's gonna take a
Mike,
stab at it.
I'll take, making sure everything is already prepped beforehand, so that when you do transition, it's seamless. And then if you establish that every single Sunday or every single class period, the kids already, they'll create that routine, it'll just become like muscle memory.
Yes.
But you have to make sure you have everything set up
Yes.
ready to go.
Ready to go. Like the snacks, don't bring the juice and cookies in a package. No, have a tray. There's the juice all poured ahead of time. The cookies are on a napkin and you just hand them out, right? The same with craft events, you know. All the supplies that each person's gonna need and all the tools they need right there within reach where you just have it all ready and hand it to them. Oh, go ahead, Dana, yeah.
I think I'm also too involvement, you know, like young kids need to, when you know, could you pass this out, do that? It makes them feel good too, so that helps with everything, and plus they get a chance to be focused on something so they won't be climbing out the window.
Exactly. No, I think you're absolutely right. But you know what's sad? Like, we have in our VBS, we have a ton of helpers, a lot of teen helpers and things. A lot of times, the teacher will be struggling to do everything for the class. And you'll see all the helpers in the back, like, no job to do, so they're talking to each other. It still comes back to the teacher to even be prepared to know what you're going to ask the helper to do, right? And you could say to the person in advance, at such and such a time, I'm going to need you to help me serve, you know, the snack. Here's what I want you to do. It makes it all go so much smoothly. Marilyn.
That's what you brought up VBS, and that's what I was going to mention. This past summer when hubby taught the 10 to 12-year-olds in VBS.
Okay.
I was doing registration, so I was dealing with the parents, but I was amazed at how he had an assistant, but he handled everything, and he involved the kids when it came to like changing the chairs, picking up after themselves, and he didn't ask nothing from me at all or from his assistant. He used his police officer voice in a kind way, but I was amazed at how he involved the kids, and they were looking forward to his direction. And he was like gathering them, you know, I was breaking up booger fights and all that kind of stuff, but it was amazing though, at his leadership and how he was doing that. And to this day, I'm like telling him that's a gift that he has to dealing with those children, 10 to 12-year-olds.
Wow.
And he was able to guide them, everything that you're saying, like guide them, and there was no arguments, there was no like loud voice, but not in a commanding way. It was just very firm, and let's get this together, let's do this, let's do that. They were kidding, they were joking, but that comes from like, I think a ministry that God puts in your heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and it was beautiful.
That's
It was
wonderful,
beautiful.
and I think kids really respond to male teachers because they may not even have that dad figure sometimes in their life, or someone who really cares about them. So when they come, and here's this man, and he cares, and he's listening, and he's involving me, the kids love that, and you can be very effective. Thank you for sharing that, you guys. That was great. And then finally, so supplies would be the same idea as what we talked about with procedures, just really predicting in advance every single thing you're going to need and getting as much of it prepared in advance as possible. And then, of course, preparing yourself. Now, this is the people that are winging it. This is the only thing they do. All right? They get up, they get themselves ready, they come, they're here maybe on time. And outside of that, they didn't do all of these other things. So this is what does come naturally, that you come prepared usually, that you have prepared yourself. But it's all of these other things that we need to stop and be more purposeful in preparing in advance.
I think we're going to adjust our plan.
All right.
Because sometimes if we are effective teachers and we're tuned in, we need to make adjustments on the fly. And the reason is right now it's 4:54 and we are less than a minute away from break time. So I want to give you guys we're going to take about 5 and we're going to reconvene at 5 o'clock. Okay? 5 o'clock and we'll pick up where we left off. Okay. Break. And let's get back to our notes. And what I'd like to do, we've talked about really, you guys have demonstrated the importance of planning, and then we've kind of synthesized all that you guys presented and kind of brought that to some summary instruction, which is what Cyndi just did. Now take a look at page 9, and let's talk about, if we could, the nuts and bolts of planning. if any of you have dabbled at all in the field of education, then some of these things are going to look eerily familiar to you. But I have to tell you, really think reflectively, especially those of you that attend Calvary Bible Church, think reflectively about what you see in our bulletin, about what you see on the screens, because you're going to see some similarities. And the reason why is because the principles of effective instruction and learning are overarching and transcend whatever context it is where the instruction is being given and the learning is happening. Whether that's in the context of preaching on a Sunday morning or whether that's in the context of a small Bible study on a Wednesday evening. The principles transcend. We understand the importance of planning and preparation, and to be well prepared means that you can be most effective in delivering instruction and facilitating learning, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. As far as objectives are concerned, basically, what would be a question that one should ask themselves concerning objectives for a particular lesson? What is a question the instructor should ask themselves?
Do I know what they are?
Do I know what they are? They meaning?
Objectives.
Objectives.
Yeah, what am I trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, what am I trying to accomplish here? Very good.
So what?
So what? So what? I like that. I like that. Explain what you mean by that.
Like, why, whatever I'm teaching or trying to, portray to the class, like, what is the significance of it? What should they take away from it? How is it important not only to their lives, but other people's lives? So why am I learning about this stuff? Like, they have to come away with that, oh, I get it now,
Yeah.
moment, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Where am I going? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? That really, you've got to frame that right from the very beginning. I teach a Gospel of John Bible study, and really I view myself more as a facilitator of discovery. However, though I would love for it to be that simple, that I am merely a facilitator and we're going to keep this as informal, the truth of the matter is if you were to look at my notes, right, you would see just an absolute map of various questions, various observations, parallel verses, context setting, background information. Why do if I'm hosting an informal Bible study on the Gospel of John, why would I have such comprehensive notes that only I, in looking at it, could understand? Why am I doing that?
If you're going to talk to anybody, I think, about, or teach anything to anybody, there needs to be a gap.
Mm-hmm.
And the gap needs to be in terms of knowledge difference from here to here. Or there really isn't anything to transfer.
Sure.
You see, so if B knows more than A, then A's not really the teacher,
Right.
so to speak. So some of the things that the guys came up with, I think it was on everybody's list, is where, I think Lester said it first, where can I get derailed? What might somebody ask me that could knock me off kilter here, and how am I going to respond to that? And I found that trying to prepare for that is a difficult thing because you can't think everything.
Right.
But obviously you're probably pretty good at this because if you've got a big giant roadmap, then you've probably got more than what you need. And that's what I mean by the gap, is that you've got to have that delta between you and the folks that are trying to receive what you have in order for transfer to take place.
That's right. That's right. Good comment. Danny.
I guess maybe with me, like for instance, like you say, you had all those things. I believe when I'm doing something, I have to give it my best. So I don't like to cut no shorts. I like to have everything possible. Not necessarily that it will be used or anything. It's just a personal thing that I think that is, to know and all that. Because, like you said, if anything, if anybody has a Bible, most of the stuff is already presented there.
Sure.
And before you read the chapter, the chapters or whatever. So, but it's just a personal thing with within myself that I have to do. because I like to want it to be the best lesson, and that I know that truly that I'm giving God my best in it. So
Yeah,
that's just me.
that's awesome, and I like that. And what you inferred here is, in talking about excellence, and we should want to give God our very best. And that includes not just being disseminators of information, but also, you know, one of the questions is, where do we want to go? Where are we going, and how do we want to get there? But also, there's another question that's very important in the context of instruction and learning, and that is, how should this change the way I live my life? And a lot of time has to be spent, now that you have mastered the content insofar as you are able, now you think really intentionally about those real life situations that should be governed by the information that you've received, that should be dictated by your understanding of the truth of the gospel. That's very important for preaching, and that's also important in the teaching context as well. So let's just look at this once again, because basically we want to, in terms of objectives, we need to know where we're going and how we're going to get there, but you also need to consider your audience. Thinking of, you know, you've got a group of 9-year-olds and you're studying the Gospel of John, chapter 5, you're probably not going to dive in deep with a group of 9-year-olds the way you would with a group of adults who are sitting around a table, you see? So you've got to consider your audience, and you've got to develop questions and facilitate their learning in a way that's appropriate to the group that you have. Otherwise, you run the risk of, with the young ones, shooting way over their head with content that isn't going to mean anything to them. You have similarly the problem of potentially shooting too low with your adults, and you could hear snores before too long because you're not challenging them with something in their own personal lives. So you've got to understand and be aware of your audience. Now, that speaks to age and levels of development. Also, you need to be in tune as a teacher. I think sometimes it becomes, especially with those who default to being the sage on the stage, you run the risk of teaching at people rather than instructing and facilitating learning with people. You understand the difference? There are lots of teachers who have a wealth of knowledge and they teach at people. It's like, I'm going to deliver this content to you whether you like it or not. That's just not the right mentality. Rather, we are all stakeholders. You spoke to that a little bit ago, Danny, when you involved those kids. And when you involve, they become stakeholders. Now they have a vested interest, and there's a buy-in where that's concerned. And you need to be able to facilitate and encourage the buy-in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Another helpful thing to do in terms of setting objectives, goals, is something called the backwards design model. Anybody ever heard of this? Backwards design model? Kind of envision where you want to be, and then you work backwards from where you want to be to where you are right now, and then you craft a plan to be able to get to where you want to be. Yeah. That's the backwards design model. And so you want to envision the end product, envision the goal that you want, and then work from that end point back to the starting point, and then craft a plan in order to get there. Sounds complex, sounds confusing, but it's really not. It's not that deep. Look at number 2. I'm going to give you 3 pronouns, and let's see if you can figure out where these 3 pronouns fit. I, we, and you. I, we, and you. Anticipatory set. An anticipatory set is really the hook. And as a history teacher, Mike, you know, I hear the hook, and what do you suppose always comes to mind as residents of Pennsylvania?
I
in
don't
a
know.
battle that took place in 1863.
Oh, the Gettysburg.
The Gettysburg Hook.
Yeah.
So I always think about the Union lines were formed in a hook up Cemetery Ridge, and on Seminary Ridge about a mile away facing them were the Confederate lines, and the hook was formed. You know, that's just, if you've ever been to Gettysburg, that's battlefield history, and I probably just shot right over everybody except for you, Mike.
Well,
You understand.
not my time era though.
Here's the bottom line, with the hook, or the anticipatory set, to be fancy schmancy about it. The hook is merely that which is going to engage people. What are some ways in which you can capture interest? And then, of course, the duration of the lesson is in holding the interest. But how do you capture it in the beginning? What are some ways in which you can do that, Brian?
Well, doesn't music have a hook?
Okay. It can. Yeah. Yeah. Think about the lesson though. You could start with a lyric to a song, and that could capture interest. Think about the lesson itself.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of along the same line, but like almost posing some kind of a question or a riddle of some sort, where the only way they're going to figure this out is to walk through the process.
Deduce the meaning?
Yeah.
What kind of instruction would that be?
Oh gosh.
Deduce.
Deduction.
Deduction.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be that you would
Sherlock Holmes.
that would be a deductive lesson. You state what it is up front, and you are going through the process of inductive study, right? And so you're observing, you're interpreting, you're applying. That's kind of a model. But anyway, the hook is to capture interest. You want to prepare them for engagement, right? Set the tone for what is to come. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead and speak to that.
No, just remembering the skit you did today. It got your juices flowing in as far as preparation, and then what was covered was preparation, so it was a hook.
That's right. What kind of instruction am I delivering right now? What is this called?
Lecture.
Lecture? What's another word? Because that's a dirty word in my book.
Yeah, right.
Direct instruction. That's right. Direct instruction. Yeah. And so direct instruction could take the form of a lecture. Or, and it's necessary. And I'm joking with you because in my circles, lecturing is a dirty word. But it shouldn't be, because you need to speak. Like, how would you know what I expect of you unless I tell you what I expect of you? Right? How would you know what the instructions are for a particular project unless I tell you what the instructions are?
That's not really a lecture.
No.
You know,
It doesn't
you
have
have
to.
to set it up
That's right.
and give them the expectation.
Now, direct instruction is important. It could end up being a lecture in the meat part of the lesson, or it could just be that which is necessary in order to communicate information that you need to have, right? Guided practice. I am trying to get you engaged. We are now going to say to one another, I'm going to say together with you, now let's see what we know. Okay? The instruction has happened, hopefully the learning has taken place. Now, we need to see what it is that we know, and the teacher should guide them to that end. Okay? Every good lesson has to have closure. Okay, and yeah. The number of times I've seen that in this current generation as I'm discipling them to become teachers, whether that be in Sunday school or in their respective ministries, that is not an effective way to conclude a lesson. Okay, all right, so yeah. And I want to say, no. We've got to wrap it up with, okay, what have we learned for today? That might take the form of a summary. That could take the form of, how are you going to take what we've learned today and change your way of living? What are your takeaways? There's got to be some way to come back to and think of a box and a bow that comes from the bottom that you want to tie off. How are you going to tie it off? You've got to be able to tie it off. Yeah.
One thing that I did was I would have a slide with the objectives. So the objectives would be in the front, but then they would also be at the end. And
There you
I would
go.
say, okay, you know, when I talk to supervisors, okay, so let's see if we did this today.
Mm.
And then I would say, okay, Keith, for number one, let's go, you know, let's go over this. Did we do this today? Tell me how.
Sure.
And then we would go, and then, you know, Cyndi, how about number two, Danny? And we would go over it. And then if I saw that someone was having an issue with one of those, then that engagement of, can somebody help Cyndi out?
Mm.
You know, there's no blame if you don't know, because this is, everyone learns differently.
Sure, that's right. Good example, good example. And then give opportunity for them to reflect, for them to re-engage, for them to actually go out and do, okay? So I want you to be engaged. I want us to think about and reflect on what we've learned. Let's see what we know. I want you now to go and put this into practice. I, we, you. Brian?
How many different types of learning is there? Like you've got people that can hear and learn, people that see and learn. What are the other aspects you have to put into there for those people who don't normally function as a regular person?
Some would argue that the best form of learning is doing, so there are those who do and learn. But we really didn't get into, this speaks to the multiple intelligences, which you can look at that chart, and I could spend another session getting into all of that. But suffice it to know, here's the takeaway. People learn in different ways, and we have to be cognizant of that, which is why we should challenge ourselves to change our instructional style. I did this last week in my preaching. My default method is to be inductive. I like to clearly state where I'm going right up front. I like to then state what my points are right up front. I like to then go and develop my points, and I go through a linear progression in order to do so. I was challenged to challenge myself, and I decided to take a deductive approach. And so it was a stretch for me. I literally wrote one message that was 8 pages long by midweek, and then I took that 1-page message and I rewrote another. I took that 8-page message and I rewrote another 8-page message that was a different style, that was deductive, because I wanted to challenge myself. As teachers, that was for preaching on a Sunday morning. For teachers, that is the kind of mindset that you want to have, is to stretch yourself. Why? Well, it grows you, but you know what? You now have the potential of reaching more learners, more people, because as Brian said, everybody is unique. And you're not teaching, you're not throwing content to see what sticks. You are teaching people who have knowledge, intellect, and a soul spirit, and have been given emotion. And so they're real people. That's the challenge, is to look out and see real people with real problems, with real issues, with real strengths, with real weaknesses. How should this impact them? I've talked for far too long, and I've just taken all of my wife's time. I'm sorry.
I got one more for you, Pastor.
Yeah.
When you're looking out on your audience, do they look like heads of lettuce? Does that take the edge off?
Iceberg or romaine? No. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you know your audience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's you got that advantage. You got the house advantage. You know, they come for you. But what did I just say?
Heads of
Lettuce. So I look out and see heads of lettuce.
Yeah, because some people, and I was reading, I think he was talking to Samuel, and the angel said, don't look at their faces. You know what I mean? As you're talking, you know, you could, as you're trying to put the message out, you know, you haven't got it out yet. You're working on it, and you're seeing the look on the people's faces, like, you know, I'm listening, or I'm losing you, or, you know, you get that possible desperation if you can't have the time to relax and put your message out without interruptions. Because you know when an interruption comes in, it's hard to find your place again sometimes.
Yeah.
But the heads of lettuce is you know, I've heard that like in movies and stuff, you know, to not be worried about what people are thinking about you.
Sure.
you look at them as inanimate objects.
Yeah. To a degree, that's true, but then there's also the other side of that coin, which would be an insensitive and indifferent approach on my part. I don't know where everybody is in their life, and you may hear me say sometimes, I don't know where you are in your life right now, where it involves this thing that we're talking about. There are some things that I am aware of. I never preach to the information that I have from one or more individuals. I am preaching expositionally through a text with a historical, grammatical hermeneutic, staying true to the text and keeping it in context. That's why I preach through books of the Bible, or I preach through passages. When I'm thinking about how this ought to change our lives, I'm thinking about our culture. I'm thinking about the responsibility of the church to the culture. I'm thinking about individuals and struggles that they must be having because I'm having them. This is one of the benefits of me being in the workforce outside of this church. I teach in a public school Monday through Friday. I'm keenly aware of what's going on in our culture. And so with that information, I am uniquely equipped to be able to speak to those kinds of issues, because I'm living them along with everybody else. So I think as a teacher, if you take that and understand that, I am not the sage on the stage, and I am here to deliver content to you because I am, after all, the content specialist, but rather I am together with you and we're in this together, that is a very different approach than the former.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect.
And that is authentic instruction and learning.
I ran up against a situation in adult Sunday school a few weeks back that, it happens. These things happen. As much as you prepare, you're always going to run up against something you're not prepared for. And so I was reading in Nehemiah 2, and it was the time where Nehemiah was before the king, and he had been burdened for several months, and it was only now that the king was recognizing that Nehemiah had a long face. And there is a parenthetical statement in there that says that this conversation was going on in the presence of the queen. Do you remember this conversation, Mike? So that particular day, Lisa was not here, and so all the women were down here. So Alan Redpath did not even address that issue. Warren Wiersbe said, yeah, and by the way, he was in the presence of the queen. That's all he said. And so I never thought about it. So I got to the point where I'm starting to wrap up and do the takeaways, and I say, okay, let's open this up for questions here. And right over to where Danny and Brian are sitting, Rosie's up front and Diane's right behind him. And Rosie raises her hand and Diane's hand goes right up, and what's this parenthetical about the queen? And I looked at Diane and I said, what's your question? Same question. Goodness.
Don't you have a ladies' Sunday school to
Well,
go to?
really. So I did the best that I could come up with at the point. And I looked at it and I said, listen, I don't know. And then I opened it up and said, all right, does anybody have any thoughts on this? But it's closed now. We had to close for the opportunity. Or for the day. So I lost opportunity to speak, but I had another opportunity the next week. So what I did is I went back, and even though I didn't find any comments on it in the people that I was using, I have a whole library of books, and I have a handout. So I made the next week's handout the opening question, why the Queen? And again, I didn't think that would be important. Never gave it a second thought. But knowing your audience, and a different audience than what I was used to at the time, I needed to be, respectful of, hey, that's going to be important to somebody, and I need to say something about this formally. So the following week, I made sure that the girls were all up with Lisa again. So I went back to Rosie and I said, "Here you go, kiddo. Good question. You got me." But But that's what, a curriculum like this lends itself to. Hey, you're always gonna get an opportunity, and these are Christian people that are gonna give you extra grace when extra grace is required. They're certainly not gonna sit around and throw tomatoes and eggs at you because, you have to say, I don't know, a couple of times.
Yeah.
But there are ways to get back to where the people want you to be, and every question is a legitimate question.
Sure.
So you gotta make sure that you give it your due.
And I like what you said, Dave, about being honest to say that I am not prepared to answer this question today. Or I don't know the answer to that question right now, but you have my word that I am going to invest some time and I'll get back to you. That it's embarrassing, and I've seen this happen before, where people in their pride, put on the spot, will try to fudge an answer. Oh, it's like painful to watch. Like, just stop.
Yeah,
Stop.
I knew I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
And you know what? I researched the answer, and I think I've convinced myself that any answer is speculation.
Yeah.
But and I think I may have even said that when I came back the following week and addressed that. But like I said, the women were here then at that point. But I didn't want them to walk away from that class thinking that I didn't care about their question.
Sure.
And so I wanted to give it some time. And that's really, I think, is the best we can do as you say, facilitators of people that want to learn. My motivation as a teacher is, hey, you want to learn? I want to learn too. Let's learn together. Go ahead. I got some information here to put out. Let me put it out. Ask your questions. Let's mull it over together. And the stuff that we can't figure out, we'll just chase around a little more. And that worked out pretty well, I think.
Awesome. Awesome. Cynthia?
I did want to just let you know that Keith talked about a general lesson plan format, and that in your appendix you do have like what do you call this? A template to use for planning a lesson. Now, remember that in this class, we took classes for 4 years straight, and he went on and got his master's beyond that, right? There's so much more that could be said. We're just peeking over the fence to see if there's anything in the educational world that would help us here at church to make sure that our lessons are really reaching our students. So if this style of writing out your lesson, including these components, helps you to be more organized, helps you to create a more, a complete lesson, then use it. If it doesn't, you have a different style, you're not bound by this. Jesus didn't write up his lesson plans with, objectives and a hook and perhaps elements at times, but you don't have to do this. Keith is exposing you to this, and it would be good to give it a shot. Try to write out a lesson and see how that jives with you. And certainly if you had any questions about any of them, we could help you further with that.
Or at least a streamlined version of it, like an intro, you could call hook or engagement, and then summary or closure. Just those three things. That's beginning, middle, and end. I mean, whatever you want to do, some way in order to organize yourself. So.
And the last thing then that would go, with that, I did want to mention that years ago we purposed to help the youth of this church learn how to study their Bibles for themselves. They had been hearing a lot of lessons from Sunday school on up, but they didn't have the tools or the ability to open their Bible and apply it to themselves. So when he was talking about the I, we, you transition, over time, that wasn't one lesson, but over time, that was kind of the approach we took. We would open the Bible together at Bible time on Wednesday nights, and Keith would model for them how to make observations from a passage and then interpret it and apply it, right? And then it moved into the we. They would feed ideas, and we would collect them on, an overhead, whatever. and they would gather.
Overhead,
Oh my
So,
God.
you know,
20th century technology.
projector, yeah. And they would create them together.
The audio visual.
Dated
I knew what you were
Blackboard.
Yeah, there you go.
There's no such thing.
Does anybody know what an overhead is?
The projection. But at the end of it all, the kids were able to open the Bible for themselves, read it, do that at home, come back and share what they got out of their personal Bible study. And like he has shared before, the kids from that original youth group have gone on to be our Awana commander, our Andrew, who just preached this morning, our music director. These kids grew to really embed that process of learning God's Word, and they study it to this day. So that's, I think, a good example, too, of the process of learning, transferring information. Like Dave said, the gap, right, but closing that gap
Close
as
the
you
gap,
go, right?
yeah.
And they learn to do it for themselves.
Yeah, excellent.
So the rest, I think, we'll leave for next time, but I did want to just finish by explaining the homework for the class. So, of course, there's the movie, which you have a few weeks to finish that, and we did warn you it's a little bit dated, but it's so special, really. Just tolerate the datedness of it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful testimonial. And then the lesson. We are going to cover on the last 2 weeks, I think it's 5, actual methods of ways you can creatively deliver a lesson. And so you're to pick one of those that kind of, jives with you, that you want to try out. And in the description here, it says to try to include the other things we've talked about in the course. So, if we've talked about being prepared, try to demonstrate that as you teach your lesson. We've talked about, the hook from today, getting the people's attention before you get into your lesson. Try to include these elements, a few. Of course, you're not going to show everything, but just show what maybe you've learned in the course in a brief video, and then send that to us. We're not going to show it in class. It's just for us to enjoy and see what you've learned through this class. Are there any questions about the assignment? We had thrown around the idea of possibly delivering them on the last day here. We decided against it, so I think last week we kind of misspoke and had to pull it back. So I just want to make sure you understood the assignment.
Session number 4, our last session.
Yeah.
Did you speak to that?
No.
Okay. What time are we concluding, wanting Amy to conclude session 4?
At 5 instead of 5:30.
And we wanted to start at, we were asking to start at 3:30, right?
If possible. If not, we can start it.
Session 4, we are asking if you are willing to begin at 3:30 and conclude by 5. If you could think about that and let us know for session 4. It's on the 23rd. We have a family thing going on that day.
Family gig.
And it would be helpful to be able to do that, but we would like to conclude by 5 o'clock on that day.
And I think we'll conclude by 5 regardless.
Yes.
Either we will condense from 4 to 5, or if we go a little earlier, that gives a little more wiggle